Good morning. For you folks just arriving, I'm not Alice Bellis. Alice is ill. I'm Scott Planting, and I'm going to take her place this morning. So this is the second Sunday in Lent. Larry has a very powerful sermon for those who look forward to that. And let me just read a couple of verses from the scripture lesson he's going to preach on from Mark. Jesus called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Let us pray. Eternal God, what can we give in return for our life? Teach us to take up the cross of Christ in humility and obedience, offering all for the sake of the gospel, so that we may receive life in all of its fullness. And especially this day, we ask for your healing mercy upon Alice, who has so faithfully taught us your word over these past weeks. Watch after us all. Through Christ we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So my entire ministry of 45 years was spent in rural Maine. I spent the first 35 years of it in the mountains of Western Maine, where I served a cooperative parish called Mission at the Eastward, which was a parish of 12 small churches scattered over several counties, very, very rural. And then in 2010, I was called to the Maine Seacoast Mission, which was the office at that point was located in Bar Harbor, Maine, in Acadia National, right near Acadia National Park on Mount Desert Island. The slide we have up is what the Seacoast Mission is best known for, and that's the iconic boat, the Sunbeam. The Sunbeam is the last operating mission boat in the country. There used to be quite a few of them, and serving primarily island, far distant places. So I want to take you aboard the Sunbeam today and visit some of the places that I love. As I said, I spent my entire adult life with people who committed themselves to a place for the long haul. This was in Western Maine and then on the coast. The people I have known wintered and summered in these communities and in a place that they knew deeply. They were able to experience the wonder of each season, pride of great stewardship. They grew old next to the ones they loved and got to watch a new generation of young people grow up in the land they so cared so much for. But I also saw over those 45 years an exodus of people, especially of young people. And that has worn down the threads of community and belonging. Many of the rooted families are still present, but they grow old. In the midst of a world of change, which when you think of the word change, for most of us, that means growth or good or moving up or doing things. Change in these communities has always meant loss, and it's a profound thing. What has not changed is the mission of the Seacoast Mission. Let me just read you our mission statement. Rooted in a history of compassionate service and mutual trust, the mission seeks to strengthen coastal and island communities by educating youth, supporting families, and promoting good health. Could I have the next slide, please? So you all have a copy of that. The area we're talking about is down East Maine. I served, there's Farmington, that's where I lived in this area in Western Maine for 35 years. And then the area the Seacoast mission covers is this coastal area down to the Penobscot Bay, sort of this area up here. That's what's known as down East Maine. That's what we're going to be talking about. So I want to take us on a trip out to Matinicus. Can I have the next slide, please? The Sunbeam is its home port is in Northeast Harbor, Maine, and just to take you on a typical trip. This was I want to talk about a December trip. Jillian, who's the steward, the boat has a captain, a first mate, steward, who provides all the hospitality services, a nurse practitioner, and a chaplain. And Jillian, who lives about 2 hours east, she always rides the night before, brings all of the provisions. The boat's going to be out for a week, and gets everything ready. On this trip, I would have arrived at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and Jillian will always have gallons of hot coffee, and she will make breakfast sandwiches, because where the boat is harbored, it's a harbor of lobster boats. And all these guys are coming to work, and they all of them stop by for coffee to fill up their thermoses and get a breakfast sandwich before they head out. The boat itself is 74 feet long. It's number 5 in the series. The first one from 1906 was a sloop. This is the second in series of steel boats. 74 feet long, 22-foot beam, 7-foot draft, built by Washburn and Doughty in East Booth Bay, and was launched in 1995. The last thing I did at the Seacoast mission was we had a capital campaign to raise $3 million to refit the boat. Thank you, Sigma Kappa. You were very generous in your contributions towards that. So the last decision I had to make is, do we refit the boat or do we build a new boat? And a new boat would have cost $7 to $10 million. So the $3 million refit. The issue with refitting the boat is that she goes 10 knots, really slow. Compare that to lobster boats that now go 30 knots, zooming around. So, in the olden days, 100 years ago, the boat was sort of an ambulance. No more. Everybody gets past us. But the boat was refitted, all new electronics. It had steel boats rust from the inside out. I didn't know that until I got in this process. And so we had to do a lot of work on the inside of the hull. And it's very much of a working boat. And the whole goal was to keep it a working boat, a safe working. And again, the boat goes out year round. It has a 450 horsepower single screw diesel engine, steel hull, and it's strong enough. It serves this time of year as an icebreaker to clear harbors. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is sort of this is Northeast Harbor. Larry goes to this island right Swan's Island, which is right there. That's when he goes, when he disappears for 2 weeks. That's where it is, right there. That's about a 6-mile trip. So the boat, this is Washington County, Jonesport. Our area goes up to about Cutler. Because there are roads that go down this way, we don't take the boat up there. We can drive up there, but a good part of our ministry is there. But the boat covers all of this area down through here. So this is going to be your one takeaway for today. Okay. What does down east mean? Okay. This is a technical term. And down east means in the days of sailing ships coming up from Boston, which is right down there, would carry goods up this way. And so they'd be sailing up this way, and the wind would be at their back. The wind would be coming from that direction and would push them. So they would be pushing them downwind to go to their eastern destination. So they're going downwind and they're going east.
Running.
You all got that?
Yeah.
And I want you to share that with somebody today, okay? Like at lunch or something. Ask them what down east means.
Well, as somebody who has watched Murder, She Wrote for many, many years,
Right.
I hear about down east.
Right, now you know what it actually means.
Now I know what it means.
Okay. So that expression has become sort of a catch-all to describe actually the area I from Bucksport all the way east. That's what it is. And the mission has served this area since 1906. And I mean, I love this. This is from the first annual report of the Seacoast. It was then the Seacoast Missionary Society, 1906, to sail a sloop. And again, they were sailing a sloop in those days. That's a sailboat from Kittery Point, which is down here at the border, to Quoddy Head, up there. To sail a sloop from Kittery Point to Quoddy Head in all kinds of weather is not a small undertaking. To call on families on isolated islands, visiting the light keepers and the life-saving stations is a task of greater magnitude. Love that phrase, a task of greater magnitude. And we do basically the same thing. We don't go to lighthouses, well, all that's changed in life-saving stations, but we still, cover all of these very remote places. So get on the boat, coffee, we leave about 5 and arrive at Matinicus, which is that dock right there, at about noon. Matinicus is 30 miles out to sea, smaller than Central Park, no stores, no restaurants, no gas stations, no pharmacies, a one-room schoolhouse, a post office, a church, and a library. Everybody catches lobsters. That's what they do. It's interesting. This is another factoid you can share. The number of Maine islands where people live year-round has dwindled to just 15 today, from a high of 300 a century ago. Down east, how many islands are populated in Maine? Got two facts for lunch today. There'll be 30 people living out there all winter. Docking is a real challenge. Again, the captain and the engineer are just masterful with this boat. At low tide, when we pull into the main wharf on Matinicus, the sunbeam will bottom out, it'll sit in the mud. And actually the keel of the boat had to be built strong enough to be able to sit in the mud. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And the crew has to remember to pump the water from one side of the boat to the other side, to the side of the boat that leans into the wharf. Otherwise, we would go back and forth like that, which would roll you right out of your cot at night. So that, again, I was all pretty new to this stuff, and that was when all of a sudden the boat goes like that. It was catches your attention. When you pull in, there's most of the island is waiting for us. There's a handful of kids from the school. These small islands, the most important thing is having a couple of kids to keep the schools open. That people, they'll pay you to go out there with kids to live there, just to keep the school going. So the teacher and the kids, yes, sir.
Because it costs the county a lot of money to run those little schools.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does. But it's a sign of life for them. Without that, so like that and the post office are the two important things. And so as soon as the boat gets in, the nurse And the chaplain, they have their LL bean bags, and they have fresh fruits and vegetables. The nurse has her stuff, and they, over the next couple of days, will make home visits to every single family. And they really, they check in on everybody. We have there's a telemedicine system on the boat. There will be a series, so people will have a series of appointments with their doctors on the mainland, and we're able to connect with specialists up and down the coast. One of my favorite stories is my daughter, who lives in Boston. Her neighbor was a neurologist, is a neurologist at Mass General. And she was talking, and it turns out he does telemedicine for stroke care. And so my daughter is saying, wait, hey, my dad does this too. So this guy, who's an MD, PhD, one of the best neurologists in the world, loves the sunbeam. So he'll spend his vacation with us. He'll come out for a week, and then he does all of this stroke prevention stuff with all these old people, and he just loves it. So those are the great things. But they're always scanning. They're just checking everybody out. Do you have food enough? How are you doing? Especially older people are just fanatical about staying on the island. You know, their families all say, oh, you got to come to shore. You got to come to Rockport. You can't be out here. Oh, man. They want to be there. So that's what the nurses does, is make sure you're okay. You're okay. It doesn't always work. That evening, we all walk over to there's a beautiful chapel. And the chapels on these islands have stained glass. And in the stained glass, they have the names of fishermen who were lost at sea or at war in them. Very powerful. You cannot be in that place without reading the names of these folks who were lost at sea, because the sea's right there. And in December, it really looks dangerous. We have potluck supper in the church basement, and then we have church upstairs. And this is like the one thing I can do. So we have somebody has a guitar, and there may be 20 of us. Freezing cold in these places. And you know, we sing Christmas carols and we say the prayers. And I do my best I can preaching. And it's really wonderful. It's just fantastic. Because again, when you're 30 people, 30 miles out in sea, you're not seeing many people. After the service, crew, we all go back and we're sort of sitting around having coffee. And again, the boat is low tide, and we're looking out the window port, right at the dock, which is sort of like, so we're sitting in the dock, like right here, and there's a guy walking back and forth, and he's on his phone, and he's pretty mad, and he has this loud, angry conversation going on. And the nurse says, I don't like the sound of this. He scares me. And she gets up and locks the door. We never lock the doors on the Sunbeam. And so the rest of us sort of gather together, and we say, I hope this guy leaves. But Jillian, the steward, pops out, and she goes out and she starts talking. All we can see is his legs from where two sets of legs. And she talks to him. And a few minutes later, she brings him in. And she kind of turns to me and she whispers, oh, he's a sweet boy. He's a sweet boy. Girlfriend problems. And then, so we have coffee with him, and he's what's called a sternman. And sternmen are the guys, and there are some stern women who work with captains. They're the sort of the guys, people who do the hard work on these fishing boats. And they're a sort of a nomadic group. They move around. So he says, I heard there's a minister on this boat. Can I talk to him? And I say, well, that would be me. And so we go up to the pilot house, And I hear the story over the next couple of hours about addiction and loss and just this incredibly difficult story. And I say a prayer, but all I can do. And I say, come back, talk to the nurse tomorrow. And he comes back and he has coffee, sees the nurse for a little bit, and then he heads out for a day's fishing. On this particular trip, again, we're there for a couple of days. And we were heading from there over to Idaho, which is a couple-hour trip. And we're on the way. We'd left about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We like to travel at night, so we can have most day hours on these islands. And boy, traveling in a 74-foot boat in the North Atlantic in the wintertime and at night, and you sit everybody sits in the pilot house, and it's absolutely dark except for the lights on the electronics. Nobody talks. And boy, the captain and the first engineer, they are so focused on what they're doing. It's very, very, very powerful because there's shoals, there's rocks that you hear around. And we're heading back in about 4 o'clock, and the captain there's a voice comes over the radio that there's this Cessna Air Service, Penobscot Air, that flies out to all these. They all have these dirt land strips, and they bring out groceries and whatever you need. And one of the planes coming in crashed. It was a downwind, and it killed the pilot, who everybody knew. So the captain gets us together, and what do? Well, we go back. The pilot was taken and brought back to that chapel where we just were, and the chaplain on the boat, Seacoast, spent the night with him, just sitting with him. And the next morning, every soul on the island came to the boat and had breakfast and just talked. And as one of the islanders said, about this, well, what else would we do? What else would we do with that? So economics on these islands is tricky. Their life has been a series of booms and busts. A century ago, these were all granite quarries, shipbuilding, fishing, farming, and currently Maine is in a lobster boom. But as you all probably heard, the Gulf of Maine, the temperature is rising, and it's driving lobsters more northeast towards Canada. And that really leaves these islanders wondering how much longer they can make a living. And that is really intense. That's really intense. There's this big issue with right whales. You might have seen in the news, a right whale recently got tangled up in lobster gear and died. And there's only like 100 right whales left. So there's all this talk about regulation around this. Oh man, that's intense because it has to do with a livelihood for people. So that's that. So everybody knows Acadia National Park, Bar Harbor, Mount Desert Island, right there. 3 or 4 million people come there every summer. What nobody knows is this area. So when you come down to Ellsworth, nobody ever goes on Route 1 that way. You all come down right down there and stop. The Seacoast Mission has been serving, this is Washington County, since its beginning. Nobody ever goes there. And that's
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Moisture of the map. Where's Idaho, please? Oh, yeah, thank you.
And Mechanica is on there.
But Mechanicus is right down there.
Is that on this map you gave us?
Yeah.
Maybe somewhere. It might be just a little teeny dot.
Oh, okay.
I think it's labeled right above the ferry, the word ferry.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So that's Mechanicus. That's what it looks like. It's all lobster traps. So the next slide, please. And this is what Washington County looks like. These are blueberry barrens, and that's where you get your Wyman's blueberries, which I hope you all had for your breakfast this morning for the antioxidant value of them, because that's a blueberry barren in the winter time. This is the most rural county in the United States, and it is one proud place. Generations have fished for lobster, dug clams, worms, raked blueberries, withstood really long, harsh winters, and thrived. These are the most Western Mainers, and these folks are incredibly self-sufficient, deeply bonded with their communities. But now they're facing really, really difficult times. Things that really have fallen apart. Nearly 30% of the kids live in poverty. And more of those kids are living in persistent poverty than anywhere else in New England. It's ranked among Maine 16 counties as the least healthy. There's one hospital, one small hospital, very limited access to quality health care. You name it. I was the president of the Seacoast mission. I didn't want that title, but the board wanted me to have that title. So anyhow, what's powerful about this place is it really struggles. People have a hard time. And people from away just look at it as the end of the world, as a place without hope. But when you spend 10 years in a place, these are great people. They're incredibly proud, hardworking. It's kind of the world that kind of has moved away from them. So everything we always talked about was wanting to change them. It irritated me. I had big fights about this. The biggest issue, one of the things, we had a chairman of our board, a guy named Ed Greaves, real successful guy, big sailor, had a summer home in a place called South Addison. Kind of the next slide, too. Okay, this is the sunbeam at Christmas. Is an old picture. Next slide, please. We have a 60-acre place in a little town of Cherryfield, and this is our food pantry, which is run like a grocery store. Really, really very well run place. Food security is a huge issue. Kind of next picture, please. Hold it there for a sec. Ed Greaves, good sailor, he and his wife Connie. Ed was the chairman of the board. This is just before I came on board the boat, the mission. And he wanted to do something for kids. So my predecessor, Gary DeLong, spent a couple of years trying, how can we help these kids? Persistent poverty, bad health, school's not great. What can we do? They looked at all kinds of options, and they came up, we're going to start an after-school program. And we're going to provide enrichment for kids in about 10 schools and a couple school districts. We're going to provide them the kind of support that they don't have in schools. And so it's an after-school program. Well, he got sick. He had prostate cancer and he was dying. And his best friend from college, a guy named Amos Hostetter, came to visit and said, Ed, I want to give you a gift. You've been my best friend. I want to endow a chair at Amherst College in economics in your name for $3 million. Nice thing. And Ed, to his everlasting glory, said, Amos, that's boring. Anybody can do that. I want you to give $3 million to start this program. He did. He did. One of my favorite stories about Amos Hofstadter. This is a guy who's a billionaire who started cable television years ago. Sweet guy. We're at this small school in Cherryfield, and and he and his wife Barbara, we're sitting with a bunch of like third and fourth graders, and we're doing a talking stick. You know what a talking stick is? When you sit in a circle, and the person with the talking stick can talk. Everybody else has to keep quiet. So when kids talking stick, and Amos starts talking, and this little kid said, "Mr. Hofstadter, you don't have the talking stick. You have to be quiet." I love that. I love that. So the Edge, it's an after school program. You know, we have like about 900 kids in it now. And what makes it successful is we bus kids. For them to stay after school for a couple hours, you got to get them home because this is huge distances. You have no idea how expensive it is to operate a busing transportation system to get all these kids home. But it was the only way it was going to be doing. And what's delightful about the program is the director is a guy named Charlie Harrington. And Charlie was a pulling guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You know what that makes him? Really big, really, really big. And he's been in kids' education all his life. And he's just this kid magnet. He yells and screams, and they just like hang on him. They just love this guy. And he's what made the program a success. So we have all these kids and really wonderful enrichment opportunities for them. We have, after school, you have homework help, always provide some food, sort of a healthy meal. And then we do theater with them and music and all these fun things that they don't get in school. And you get Charlie and a whole bunch of really bright teachers to help them. Yes, ma'am.
And where is this town relationship to Mount Desert?
It's due east. If you look on your map, if you can find where due, it's just due east. It's Washington County, Maine. So in Cherryfield, we have, that's the center. We have a campus there, and that's where the office is. Why don't you click to the next slide? You can breaking ice. You can the next slide, please. Next slide.
To me, the mission means.
Okay, these are some. We have this great archive, and we'll just go through this. Next, please. These are some historic pictures. That's the hope where these are the first two sunbeams. So the hope, the sloop, that was a job. Okay, next please. Some of the early healthcare we did. Next please. This lady, Alice Peasley, she's one of my heroes. She was a teacher assistant from 1918 to 1947. Crowley's Island is this little tiny island off Jonesport. And the story goes that she went out on the Sunbeam when she first started and was literally dropped off and said, "See you in 6 months." So from there, she spent a year or so there. And then the next photograph I have of her, which I don't think I have, is she's out on Matinicus. And she's organized a hooked rug society for the fishermen's wives. And they made these incredibly beautiful hooked rugs, which they sold. And some of them are quite valuable now. And so I have a picture of her walking along the beach to this funny old house. And, I love a soul who from 1918 to 1947 can be traveling from Crowley Island off Jonesport to Matinicus to be a school teacher, to work with these women to set up a hooked rug industry. These are great people. Next slide, please. This is where Edge, the after-school program is located. It's Ed Reed's Educational Center. This guy Amos built this building for us. And we're just right now, they're in the process of a capital campaign, just like here, to improve this. This is we have a chapel here, and this is a community center. Every single Sunday evening, 4 o'clock, they have a community dinner called Table of Plenty. And this is the most diverse group of people I've ever seen in my life. There'll be 40 or 50 people for dinner. We'll have live music. And we have a fund so that if you can't, we ask people to host dinner. So if you can't afford to host dinner for somebody, we'll give you some cash to help you do that. So everybody is included in this. So great place. Next slide, please. Again, that's the sunbeam. Okay, next picture, please. And this sort of just is just a quick diagram of the places we serve and the kind of services we provide. Next picture, please. Food pantry. Next, please. We have a housing repair, like this church sends kids out to do home repair. We do that too. Same big issue of really, really poor housing. Okay, next, please. This is Douglas Cornman. He's the chaplain. At Christmas time, we have a long-standing ministry of providing gifts for kids. And since the beginning, they're all wrapped in white butcher paper with red twine. Every single one that's ever gone out. We like tradition at this place. The next slide, please. Part of the EDGE program is we have a ropes course. And again, just lots of fun activities. It's inspiring. The next picture, please. We have an ice skating rink. That's a liability issue too. As the president, that's what I learned about reliability issues. But again, just building up these really great kids. Next picture, please. You get fun things that are going on, always team building. Next, please. So we have program edges for kids from kindergarten up through 8th grade. And for the kids in high school, one of the things that I'm very proud of is the growth of a very strong scholarship program. And one of the best things I did at myself is we give out very generous scholarships. And I got the board of directors to go out and interview these kids in their schools. Like 1 or 2 of them would sit down with a group of kids and interview them. And the board of directors, people from away, from here, wonderfully generous, good people, but they'd never been to these places, ever. So I took these guys like to Jonesport, to a high school that has 15 kids graduating in the high school class. And out of those 15 kids, half of them, it says what they're going to do, they're captains of their fishing boats. That's what they do. The island kids, I have lots of stories. These island kids, these little, like a 7th or 8th grader, they have to go to mainland to high school. So that's a big deal when they got to go. So we do a lot of work to get them ready for that. But you take a 7th or 8th grader, they're almost all captains of their own boats, fishing boats. They're smaller boats, not like their moms and dads, but they have smaller boats, and they're captains. And these kids can tear apart a diesel and put it back together again. Any of your kids tear apart a diesel and put it back together again? And operate a boat out in the Atlantic Ocean catching lobsters, And they feel, oh, geez, we're not as cool as the mainland kids. You're fine. You're really pretty good kids. One of the difficult with getting these kiddos, the world, including our board of directors, tells these kids to leave, to go to college, and to move to Washington, D.C., to leave. The kids don't want to leave. This is home. This is a place they love. It's a huge struggle. A lot of their parents, school was not a good experience for them. They weren't supported. Lot of stigma. If you weren't the right kind of family, huge stigma, and it got passed from generation to generation. So a lot of our work was with families to support moms and dads in helping their kids with their parents wouldn't go into the schools because they hated school. School was a bad experience. So why would I want to go back there now? So overcoming things on when the kids were little. And then on this side with these high school kids was again that this sense, what's our future going to be? So starting in 9th grade, we have this college enrichment program where we work really, really hard to get them ready for college. I can't tell you how many kids I've bussed over to the University of Maine at Orono. And that's a school, University of Maine probably has like 7,000 to 10,000 students. These kids think they're going to New York City. They're paralyzed. Look at how can, so it's just a matter of, they just have no idea. We would take some of these edge kids, we would do these summer trips and go down to Boston, and we would cross the bridge over the Charles River into Boston, and they would look at me and say, "Where's the Statue of Liberty?" That's another few hours down the road. But so getting these kids ready for college became a huge, big part of our life. And that means, enrichment, visiting college, just beginning to think about it. And Carmen, she was on the next slide. This is the Journey program. It's a program where is for grades 7 to 12. This is where we begin how we strengthen getting these kids ready for college. Next slide, please. And this is sort of our so we give out about 100 scholarships in the $5,000 to $10,000 a year range, 4-year scholarship, 5 to 10 for 4 years. And this is a group, this is the Davis Maine Scholarship Program. And this philanthropist came to me, and he had done this in New Mexico and wanted to work with first generation kiddos to provide full 4-year scholarships and to a group of 5 or 6 colleges in New England. And this was a really big, this was a huge, huge deal. So I think this is like the first class of these kids. So each of these kids, they went through EDGE. We've known these kids since they're little kids, all the way through intensive getting ready for a really pretty good college. And we will support them for 4 years, 100%. So interesting with kids going to college, the dropout problem. I had a person, Terry, whose job was to call these scholarship kids all the time and make sure they were okay. The biggest dropout problem for a lot of these kids is they couldn't afford a book. It cost $25.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have it. They just didn't have the money, and they would just kind of disappear. So, Terry would call them and say, or a battery for their car to get to work, to a job. They wouldn't have the money for a battery. And so they just disappear. So Terry, all she did, God love her, was call these kids up. How you doing? What do you need? Simple things like that, like a book or a battery keeps the kid in school. None of us knew any of this until we started doing it. So again, to provide full freight for these kids is a really big deal. I remember talking to this guy who set this program up. This is a lot of money. And I said, are you gonna set up an endowment? And he looked at me and he said, no, I don't do endowments. I said, well, say more. He says, I do cash. And as long as your kiddos are doing okay, the cash will keep coming. God, oh my God. We're gonna get these kids halfway through. He's gonna get irritated with me and pull the plug. So all he meant was you gotta work hard with these kids. So far, so good. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of some of the healthcare. This is our nurse practitioner, Yvonne. During COVID, really interesting. We worked very closely for years with the CDC. And so when COVID struck these places, when the vaccine became available, the CDC called us and said, would you send your boat out to vaccinate people? And so their plan was, well, you'll go out for one trip for the people who are 65 and above, and another trip for the people who are 55 to 65. And the nurse said, hell no. We'll go out once to an island and we're going to vaccinate everybody on that trip. There's only, these are really small handful. So they vaccinated everybody. And went out and out and out. And, again, provided care for about a dozen islands that way, and made a huge difference, both for the CDC and for these folks who were wondering, how are we going to get this all done?
So you didn't have any resistance, any non-vax people?
No. Again, this is out on the islands, Douglas, and we brought a group, a steel drum band, and just lots of fun things. Just can you next picture, please? That's Sunbeam number 3, and that's I think those are Sigma Kappa. Tell Yvonne, I got a picture of the Sigma Kappa people. Next slide, please. And that's what. Okay. One more, please. We'll finish up. One of the things as I was finishing up, we provided a lot of direct services. We provided food, healthcare through a nurse. And one of the things we began to work on is I wanted to close down those food banks, which meant people would have enough resources to provide. So I was always very interested in how we moved from sort of a single relationship center to a community center where we could begin to work with the communities to solve these problems really long term. Next picture, please. And this is a group. This was the most recent group of Davis scholars. Those are the girls that got 4 years. You know what's wrong with that picture? No guys. Huge issue of getting guys from these populations in college. Big issue.
Gotta give up your boat.
Gotta give up your boat.
You're already a captain.
Yeah, they make a lot of money. So the long term, that's a huge issue. A dear friend of mine, a woman named Gigi George, wrote a book called Down East. And I recommend the book. She and her husband were supporters of the mission, and she used to live here in Washington, and she was a policy person, educational policy person, and wanted to learn more about the schools. So I actually got her in to some of the schools, and she wrote the book about not these women, but a group of 5 women who are doing really well in Down East. And one of these girls, actually, it's an interesting story. She got a full scholarship to Bates College in Lewiston, really good school. And she was there for a year, and she wants to be a speech pathologist and come back to her hometown in Washington County. And she quit and went to the University of Maine for speech pathology. you wouldn't have believed the uproar about leaving Bates College to go to the university. How could you do that? Bates College, really good school, is a ticket out of here. And, you know, the support that had to be given to her to let her to follow her dream, to stay at the University of Maine and become a speech pathologist and set up shop. So why don't I end there? It's a place I loved. Again, great people who gave me my life. We got a couple minutes before we close. I can ask questions or anything else. One more slide, I think. Next. No, go back to the other one then. Go back to the really good women. So good. So that's Maine Seacoast Mission.
I have one question. It seems to me you are a life CEO to that section of Maine. What does that chaplain do?
Oh, a lot. Douglas he's chaplain on the boat. What he does is he does all of those workshops with all of those high school kids, or all the kids who are going to go to high school. He does all of that. Get them ready. It's like what Jacob does here. Worship services. One of my favorite things on the boat would be he would do prayer services at 6 a.m. on the boat. Really nice. If people would come, fishermen would come on board, people would come on board and just have a quiet service. All the funerals, all the weddings, deal with all the disasters, all the, you know, and the island where drug addiction is a huge thing. He and the nurse would work really closely on that. So a big, any you know, he plays volleyball with the kids. All these places have little community centers that have a volleyball court, and he would do that. He's a really good guy.
For basically a lifetime in Maine, how was your transition to the rest of the world?
I bought a house with a little backyard, but the little backyard was really important for me. Just to have green. I miss that. So yeah, it's a nice question. What my whole I have been very influenced by a guy named Paul Farmer, who is a doctor, died a couple of years ago, who started an organization called Partners in Health, treating drug-resistant TB in developing. Incredible guy. And he always talks about accompanying people. His word is accompaniment, and that meant walking with people. And that's what I have always done. I have found that it's walking, oftentimes literally walking with people where you find out what's going on. My heroes are people like Maul Peasley, that lady who went from Jonesport to Botanicus and back. There was another guy. We had these itinerant preachers called sky pilots, great term. And there was one, Arthur Sargent in Jonesport. And I have all of his logs. He worked for about 20 years, and I have all of his daily logs. And the mission has always supported wandering around, just wandering around, meeting people, listening, finding out, and all of that comes out of wandering around, just listening to people, hearing, being in homes. When I worked for Mission of Eastward, the cooperative parish, my boss, when I first started in 1974, said that to get paid, I had to do 100 home visits a month. That was a lot of home, and that's not meeting people at the grocery store. That was going into people's homes. I taught in a seminary for a while, and I would talk to students about visiting in homes, and they would all look at me like I was crazy. But that's how you learn things, is getting out. I always tell the ministry is not it's not an office job, it's not an inside job, it's an outside job. So that's what I love. So thank you. Yeah.
And the volunteer program that your slides reference, do you have housing in for the volunteers?
Yeah.
And are they high school students or college students or what?
Both, and adults, a lot of adults.
And adults.
Church groups, just like from here.
So our church group
Could go.
do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We built actually pretty nice accommodations for them. They have showers. Most important thing of all. Okay, thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Go in peace.